All right, so North Korea failure to launch. Have you seen this news story about them launching their warship and it capsizing?
No, I am completely unfamiliar with this at all.
So this happened a while ago, maybe like a week or two ago, and I'll play a quick snippet of a video here talking about it, and then got a couple of other follow-ups. There's not a whole lot to say, to be honest, but I did find it interesting and had a few thoughts on it. So let's take a look here about kind of what happened.
May 21st, 2025. Chongjin, North Korea. Kim Jong-un watches his most advanced warship attempt its launch ceremony.
Launch of North Korea's new Navy warship ended in failure
as his brand new warship sank before his eyes.
미숙한 지휘와 조작상 도주의로 인하여 대차 이동의 평행성을 보장하지 못한 결과
This is what happened in the next 7 minutes. Here's how North Korea's naval pride became a $500 million disaster. 10:47 a.m. The ceremony begins. A 5,000-ton destroyer sits on launching rails, ready for its maiden voyage. Kim Jong-un stands with military officials, expecting another triumph. At 10:52 a.m., something goes wrong. Let's take a look at what happened. The transports.
So, from my understanding, might play a little bit more of that, but from my understanding, what occurred is, they were doing this side launch, which isn't typically done for a vessel of this size, and they both didn't have the infrastructure or the knowledge or the wherewithal to do it, and it caused an immediate capsize, which they tried to cover up then with nets and everything. I think, trying to hide from satellites and stuff, this epic failure. And, I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, honestly, it doesn't come as much as a surprise, given it's North Korea. For a variety of reasons, you're not going to get the best of the best whenever it comes to this, just due to the nature of their government and their structure and everything. But, as funny as it is to think about and watch and everything, the immediate thing that came to my mind is all of the people that are now going to be executed for this failure, right? And I think that's honestly like the saddest part of all this. But I don't know if you had any thoughts on any of this.
Not really. I mean, I want to know where the hell North Korea keeps getting its money from.
Me too. I don't know what I've looked at it some, but yeah, what do they export? What do they do? I mean, I think the only trade partners they have are Russia and China. And I don't recall what it is that they export out. And it's hard there's not a whole lot of intel regarding North Korea. I mean, again, this doesn't come as a surprise. This happens all the time with North Korea. They try and build something and it's a failure. And, from a lot of the stuff that we've heard is, they're still working with technology and stuff from, in general, very old technology. Granted, they might have, some more superior type stuff for the higher ups, but generally speaking, yeah, they're not up to date with not only their tech, but, when you cut your people off from being able to learn, from being able to understand the world, how do you expect to advance in any meaningful way? And I think very clearly they have not. So even if you had all the technology in place to be able to do this, if your people don't have the understanding, the knowledge, or even the ability to undertake such a thing, you're not going to be able to do it. And even on top of that, the way in which the country is set up is that you have to be yes men. So even if you see something that would need to be taken care of, or you have a concern or something like that, I would imagine that is not allowed, right? So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah, well, I think what they do is they duck their head and hope that they're not the one that gets pointed at.
Yeah.
Isn't the same thing going on with Xi's China? I mean, apparently he has purged so many leaders out that that might have given him a run for the money or whatever, that all he has is yes men and people who are afraid to tell him the truth about anything. So
yeah. I think there was a report that it was something like 3 million communist party members have been killed by Xi over the past several years or something. Do you think with these countries, so if you were to expect some type of revolt, how much do you think the numbers in terms of population play a role in this? I'll have to look it up. I'm not sure the population of North Korea, but you're talking, 1.5 billion Chinese, and the vast majority of them are poor and rural. So when you take that into consideration, do you think that those numbers play a role whenever it comes to revolt? Because I mean, you can keep an iron fist and really tamp down on things to a degree, and I think it's intuitive that it'd be easier with less people, right? Being able to control one person is a lot easier than 10, which is a lot easier than 1,000, a million, so on and so forth. How much of a role do you think that might play? Because I could see where North Korea being smaller, they have, what is their population? They have 20. Yeah, they only have 26 million people, right? Which is a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, but controlling 26 million would be significantly easier than 1.5 billion, particularly whenever those 1.5 billion are dispersed significantly throughout a country. So if there were to be a revolt or something, I could see it more easily coming out of China, just given the inability of the Communist Party to be able to control that many people, right? So like in the sense where you have something of a Boston Tea Party type of thing where you have these underground factions being able to communicate, being able to not negotiate, but navigate and come up with ways in which they might be able to push back, to be able to build a coalition where we know that that's not, that we have neighbors spying on neighbors. Like that's very much a thing in North Korea and stuff, but it's a smaller amount of people in a smaller geographic area. How much do you think that might play a role in the ability of the people to be able to do something about their communist regimes?
Well, for China, when we say China here in the United States, we tend to think of this 1.5 billion people as a homogenous group.
Mm-hmm.
And first off, none of that's true. The new records show that there are not that many people anymore. Granted, it may only be 1 billion people, but still, that's half a fucking billion people that aren't there. And then you take their western provinces, which are under duress. That's the Uyghurs and whatnot. They have been fighting against Chinese Han rule for decades. You've got the Tibetans who are fighting against Chinese Han rule. You've got Manchurians. Then you've got all the different subgroups that are not Han, and you've got a new class of people that came up under Deng Xiaoping and whatnot, who were going to be the saviors of China by becoming the middle class. So, they moved them out of the farmyards into the city to start these factory jobs and whatnot. But now they have an aging population, and they're not feeding their people. They're not meeting the needs of the people. And the people are not, yes, they still have a huge rural contingent, but they have also created this huge city contingent that were now disaffected, disenfranchised, and very angry middle class or former middle class, because they got to be there and then it got stripped from them or is being stripped. At the same time, you have all this purging in the military, this, that, and the other. If China says, all right, we're putting our foot down, we're not going to allow you peasants to revolt, how many military groups is it going to take to say, well, you know what, we don't agree with you, we're siding with the people, before it becomes a problem, for the communist government that is currently in charge? And can the
Right.
communist government maintain, because there is a huge push now, even amongst the Han people, to reorganize government and to give them a more democratic access to the government and a say in what's going on.
Right. And even on top of that, you add, we kind of talk about the control and everything that these regimes have, but another significant difference between, say, North Korea and China is North Korea doesn't allow access to anything for their people, right? Where we've got Chinese nationals abroad, they do have access to internet, even though it's tightly controlled in many respects, but they still have access to the world, so to speak. So they know a bit more as to what's going on and have the ability to communicate and whatnot. Whereas from my understanding with North Korea, that's just not possible. And I'm curious, even with China, how much influence, I don't know why the US or maybe some countries have tried doing this, but why, you want to talk about regime change and influence, why these other countries haven't done that. I wouldn't be surprised if India in some respects are trying to do something like that. India and China don't get along, and and India might just not be in a good place to be able to do that themselves, but being able to help out revolutionaries, being able to supply, whether it be knowledge, information, logistics, intel, financing, something to try and push for some type of regime change in that area. I could see it being easier to do that in China than it would be in, say, North Korea.
Yeah, I agree. Because China has more access to the outer world, which gives the outer world more access to China.
And Xi's noticed that, and as like you mentioned, they've been clamping down quite a bit on that, actually, significantly, actually, in terms of cutting off more and more access and reducing a lot of things like that to the outside world. And we saw a lot of this, the tariff discussion and stuff. You were seeing actually that whole urban middle class that you were talking about, the factory workers, stuff like that. They've been cutting down on the news coming out of China too, because a lot of these folks have been talking about it, and it's putting them in serious distress. And that kind of leads into two separate but related topics. One being, do you think, to me, it doesn't seem China is in a good position to be able to make any significant moves, particularly related to Taiwan, right? The topic of conversation is always China's going to try and take Taiwan. China's going to take, dude, China is, from everything I can tell, not doing great and collapsing, and they're fighting a lot of different fronts right now. I don't see how it would make any sense to try and make a move towards Taiwan. And on the flip side of that, the whole BRICS nation thing seems to be collapsing to some degree, at least with the founding members, right? China's not in a good spot. Russia's clearly fighting a war, not in a good spot. South Africa has, is dealing with all their issues, and the United States even now taking an interest in it and getting the Afrikaners out of there and stuff. So what are your thoughts on kind of both of those? The idea that China is in some position and, they're seeing this, they might try and go after Taiwan, and then also where BRICS is standing.
I think BRICS is a failed idea from the get-go. I mean, quite honestly, what is that? Brazil, Russia, India, China. If you were doing business, would you want your money being in any of those?
Well, so that's the thing, though, is to an extent, no, but also yes. I mean, again, the idea being getting back to sound money would make sense to me. So if they really were trying to go more towards a gold standard type of idea, I could see that being a good working basis. If they were trying to say, okay, we're going to shift the world currency from this fiat of the US dollar to Chinese yuan or Russian ruble or something like that. No, I think that would be a failed idea.
Well, yeah, but even if they said, all right, we're backing it with gold, I mean, are you truly going to trust them? I mean, look at how
Well, trust them to what?
lies about every damn thing
Absolutely
already.
not. Trust them to say, hey, they have the gold that they claim they have? Absolutely not. But again, there are, methods around that. Finding a World Bank, so to speak, that, can house it, similar to the Federal Reserve, or was it the Federal Reserve holding it? In any case, New York, the New York Reserve, the Fort Knox, things like that. Again, I could see it being a basis, but you'd need a neutral third party, so to speak, to show proof.
See, I used to be a huge proponent of a tangible based currency, but I saw how many ways it could easily be manipulated, et cetera, et cetera. And at this point, as a medium of exchange, I'm all about let's use the fiat, right? If you want to use hard currency, by all means, use hard currency. Trade in silver and gold. DeSantis down in Florida has now said that's legal tender. You can
I wanted to talk about that at some point too.
And I'm great with that. I mean, I'm also great with barter, right?
Yep.
You want to get your plumbing done, and you have this riding lawnmower, and the plumber guy needs a riding lawnmower, then trade them. That's another kind of thing. But currency, in and of itself, is a fabricated idea. So why not simply use it as a method of keeping track? And
I don't disagree.
Although,
but kind of on that note, sorry to interrupt. I mean, you mentioned, yes, even hard currencies like gold and such can be manipulated to a degree, but I mean, so can fiat, and I would say more easily and to a greater extent. So what do you do to solve for that problem? Or is there no solving for that problem? It's just the best system of a bad system.
I think it's just the best choice of a bunch of bad choices.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, we could go back to using sand dollars like certain coastal Indian groups did, right?
Yeah.
Then if you want to get wealthy, you spend 3 weeks digging sand dollars.
Honestly, I wouldn't be entirely against that. Make people, I mean, yes, there's a lot of problems with that, but it sounds funny to me. At least people would be out working. Although everybody
you could do it like what is the Maori, where everything is still determined by how many cattle you have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great until you have so many cattle and no one's eating them because it represents your wealth, but now they're just destroying your land.
Right.
I watched a really cool thing. This guy was talking about gold now and how absolutely difficult it is to make sure you're not being ripped off. Mm-hmm. And he got all this high-end jewelry. I mean, 18 karat and higher jewelry from quote unquote respected jewelry stores. And he showed how it passed all the tests and whatnot, right? The acid test, the spectrograph test, all that stuff. And then he broke it open and showed why it was, almost useless. I wish I would have saved that. That would have been a good one to watch and discuss. Anyway, they're using polymers now to mix with the gold, so it doesn't inhibit the spectrograph. The spectrograph just sees the gold and says, "Oh yeah, look at that, man! 18 karat gold, or 20 karat gold, or 22," and it's not. It's this little bit of gold, maybe $20 worth of gold mixed in with this polymer, and the rest of it's polymer. So you're spending $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 and having $20 worth of bullion in there and the rest of it is a cheap polymer.
Yeah. Well, let's end that segment, and actually I'll see if I can find that video. And there was a second video kind of talking about silver right now, and we can discuss all of this regarding Florida and Governor DeSantis and their move to recognize gold and silver as mediums of exchange, I believe. So catch us there on that segment. Thanks.